All right, good morning, everybody. I'm on the wrong side of the camera. So, this morning, instead of reading the news and prepping the show like I probably ought to have done, I was playing with a little project of mine, uh, and I think I've got it to a point that I can do an on-air demonstration. So we're going to play with that this morning, and I'll explain briefly what it is before we get into it. So, we've talked a lot on the show about the Nicomachean ethic, Aristotelian virtue philosophy, and the idea of virtues existing on a sort of slider. Probably my favorite example, because it's one of the clearest and easiest to understand, is the virtue of courage. So courage is the virtue. And it's not just that cowardice is the opposite of courage. Each virtue actually has two opposites, right? So you can think of it as kind of a slider, where on one end you have absolute passive cowardice. You just lay down and die. Versus on the other end, you have self-destructive recklessness, right? You've got the difference between Leroy Jenkins and an anti-gun protester, right? And courage, the actual virtue, is in the middle, right? Knowing when to take decisive action, right? Sometimes the appropriate choice is the reckless choice when no other choices are available. So what I've been working on this morning and for some time now is kind of a gamatization of that concept. So for the younger audience and some of the nerdier older audience, you'll understand a character stat sheet from role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons, GURPS, World of Warcraft. Doesn't matter if it's pen and paper or virtual, online, what have you. Your character has a stat sheet, and the stats are things like strength, fortitude, wisdom, intelligence, dexterity, typically. What I have designed here is sort of that, but instead of hard numbered stats, each stat is a numerically evaluated slider of virtue, right? And there are a lot of behind the scenes mechanics built into this game, where you have things like the only real hard stats in here are wisdom and luck. And luck is sort of an adjuster of, one, the number of possible outcomes. So in this structure, a higher luck stat doesn't actually mean that you have a higher probability of a positive outcome. It means that you have a lower variability of possible outcomes, right? Because the luck stat is affected by stats like a preparedness, right? So for example, a great stock trader might appear to be lucky because he just makes the right picks. Well, what really happens is he tightens his luck stat by doing research and understanding what the variables are out there, and then making choices that eliminate variables, so that he cannot have a guaranteed outcome, but he can choose the most probabilistically beneficial, viable option. Right. So I've been working on numericalizing and systematizing all of that kind of moral decision making. Right. Another hard stat. Well, it's not really a hard stat. Another stat that's in there is the mob number. We've talked about the mob index before, right? A person with a lower mob index is more likely to get involved in a riot, a group activity, and less likely to consider what that involvement means, what the consequences of that might be. So if you've got a mob resistant stat of 1, and one person you happen to be walking by a peaceful protest, and one agent provocateur throws a brick through a window with a mob stat of 1, you're going to be the guy that picks up the second brick. right? And the higher the mob stat goes, the more it has to, before you would even choose, before you would even consider choosing getting involved, the higher the mob stat is, there needs to be either a significant number of people where choosing to join the mob becomes a survival instinct rather than a moral decision, or their cause has to be very closely aligned with you morally. Things like that, right? So what this game attempts to do is, as you make choices, it changes the nature of your character. So, for example, if early on in the game you're faced with the kinds of choices that lead you to be you make the kinds of choices that tend toward more heroic, courageous actions, then you might increase the likelihood that you're the kind of person who would be armed. And if you are the kind of person who would be armed, and then suddenly, you're several choices into the game, you're faced with, you're at a grocery or you're at a gas station. Somebody comes in to rob the gas station. The choices you've made up to now do not include whether or not you chose to acquire a firearm and be lawfully armed. No, the choices you've made up to now ask the question, are you the kind of person who would normally be armed? And that goes further into, are you the kind of person who is morally correct? As in, you would choose to be armed because you have a right to a life, you have a responsibility to defend that right, and in order to fulfill your responsibility, you require the authority to pursue those ends which are required to fulfill that responsibility to enjoy that right. So it never asks the question, are you the kind of person who would be armed? It extrapolates from the answers to previous questions whether or not you would be armed in this situation. So you might go through and play the game thinking you're the kind of person who would be armed when the grocery store gets robbed, and also be high enough in courage and conviction, etc., that you would be the kind of person who would draw the weapon. And at that point, the computer will ask you the question, are you going to, something like, are you going to draw your weapon and put this bad guy down? And your choices, depending on the choice you've made before, which determine whether you're a coward, whether you're a pacifist, whether you're courageous, whether you're heroic, whether you're reckless, etc., the choices given to you will be determined on all of those previous choices you've made. So it might come to be that you're the kind of person who would be armed in that situation, but other choices you've made before show that you have the prudence to examine the situation and choose not to act if it's appropriate. But if the choices you've made before tend you closer to recklessness, you won't even be you'll be determined to be the kind of person who's armed, but you won't even be presented with the option not to act. Whereas, of course, if your previous choices have tended towards cowardice, you'll find yourself in there with no choices to intervene, right? So your agency going forward is affected by the choices you've made in how to correctly apply your agency in the past. This is also going to affect what's called your leverage stat, which is a sort of amalgamation of your ability to influence others, your actual capital wealth, right? And you have condigned, conditioned, compensatory power, right? I can pay you to do something. I can force you to do something through coercion by threatening some sort of harm, or I can convince you to do something. I can influence you through the mere cult of personality, right? And this will endeavor to kind of tease those ideas out of you. Now, as one plays the game, it's essentially the ultimate choose your own adventure novel, right? So imagine you're reading a choose your own adventure novel, and at the end of every page where you have to flip to a different page, there's 700,000 choices that you could make, but based on the sliders, based on the stats that have been determined by the choices you've made over time, and those sliders change every time you make a choice. every time you make a choice, at least one slider changes by at least 1 point. And that changes the options that are available to you. Then there's the wisdom stat. The higher your wisdom, which is a stat that is increased or decreased by making choices, good choices or bad choices. The higher your wisdom stat, the more choices you will be presented at each decision matrix. Right? Now, this all sounds very complicated, and it is very complex when I explain it like that, but my objective is for the game to play very intuitively. Now, right now, it's just going to run as a text-based game in ChatGPT. And no, I can't hand it out for you guys to play it yet, because basically the next step in the process where I'm at now is I'm going to be using the AI to create 3 things. One is the game itself. 2 is a sort of kind of a quiz game where it's less like playing a role-playing game and more like taking a personality quiz, right? Aaron Olson says, I want some high-end cutscenes. That's actually already something we're baking in, Aaron Olson. The original Diablo kind of pioneered the idea of randomly generated game world. So in this, I'll come back to that. So there's the game itself, there's the quiz game, and shit, what's the third one? There were 3 things. Let me go back up this real quick. Why am I going back? Remind me. What were the 3 things I wanted to do with this? So I'll bring it up in just a second. Okay, the generative moral choice game. Oh, the story generator. So the third thing is basically a custom GPT where a person can sit down and just say, okay, chat, I want you to help me design a character. And then it'll say, okay, here's the questionnaire. I'm going to ask you questions about what kind of character this is. And then that character will be created by the game, by the chat. And then you say, okay, this character lives in a world that is described in this way: fantasy, sci-fi, alt history, fiction, etc., steampunk, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so here's the genre, here's the type of thing. And then you'll answer some basic questions. Who's the big bad guy, if there even is one? Are we looking for a big conspiracy type story? Are we looking for a murder mystery story, et cetera, et cetera? And then the chat will generate the story based on taking that character through and the character always making the choice that most aligns with the Aristotelian golden mean, where he falls across the sliders on the golden mean, right? And each of those, and the engine will affect how each of those choices affects how that character would make choices in the future. So in this iteration, you don't so much play the game as you say, tell me a story, start with this guy, and I want to see what happens when he's sent off to face the dragon and save the princess. And by doing it this way, I think we'll get stories out of that engine where the end result is surprising, right? He fights his way up to the dragon and the dragon makes him a deal. And instead, all the choices along the way decide whether or not, maybe I am the kind of guy that could just be bribed by the dragon for a wagon load of gold and disappear into the sunset without the princess. Or no, maybe I really am the kind of guy that values the life of the princess over my own material gain. Or maybe the princess offers something that I find personally more interesting and valuable than a wagon full of gold. All that stuff. And I may be unleashing a monster into the world that destroys creative thought forever, but I actually don't think so. Kierkegaard tells us that the dearth of finitude is, or that the despair of finitude is the dearth of the infinite, and the despair of God is the dearth of finitude. So I think perhaps there may be some interesting, because Kierkegaard was also a big golden mean guy. I think there might be some interesting creative power in the middle of that activity. So let's I'm going to go ahead and share the screen with you, or no, I was going to go ahead and share the screen with you, but it looks like it's going to force me to reboot. So I'll be right back. Y'all just hold on a second. I'll be right back, and then we'll dig in. Oh, there's the microphone. Okay, and we're back. And here's the game. So we're going to start right here. And I'm just going to say, okay, launch the game for me. And let's see what happens. So, full disclosure, I have done all the setup. This is the first time I'm actually running the game that I set up. It's the first time I'm trying the game at all. So she says, everything starts at 0, no declared traits, no gear, no labels. You reveal who the character is by what you choose. Yeah, so for those of you familiar with playing role-playing games, in this instance, part of the way it works, you don't have an inventory. You're not geared at the beginning, except you kind of are, because what's going to happen is as you answer the questions and teach the game where you line up on the various sliders, it starts making determinations like, are you the kind of person who would be carrying a firearm normally? Right? It doesn't ask, do you remember to pick up your gun? No, it figures out whether or not you're the kind of person like me who would never leave the house without it. Right? You come across an emergency situation, right? There's a car crash, something like that. And the computer's about to present you the choices. It's going to look at the history of choices you've made and determine whether or not you're the sort of person that would normally carry a first aid kit. And so the computer is going to decide not what you're carrying, but whether or not you are morally and intellectually the sort of person who would have the specific equipment to deal with specific situations, right? So, me, for example, I have combat lifesaver training, right? I know how to do a tourniquet. I know how to splint a broken limb. I know how to do an IV and give somebody an IV drip, right? I know how to diagnose shock. I know how to treat a sucking chest wound, all that kind of stuff. All the kind of stuff that you might, deal with on a battlefield. Now, I keep a first aid kit in my truck, but I don't carry one. I don't carry like an IFAK on my hip, right? But I know people who do. I know people who make it a point to carry an IFAK or similar first aid kit on their person. They'll have like a fanny pack with tampons and super glue in it and a roll of duct tape. And the computer's going to try to suss out whether or not your character is the kind of person that would be carrying that, right? If somebody walks up and asks you for a light, it's not going to say, do you light their cigarette or no? First, it's going to ask, are you the sort of person that carries a cigarette lighter all the time? Right? So, and it's not going to ask you that question. It's going to extrapolate that from your previous responses. At least that's the theory. Like I said, I've spent a lot of time building this, but this morning is the first time I'm actually playing the game and I'm on air doing it. So, session 0, character revelation. You're starting a normal day, nothing dramatic, no danger, just a day that might turn into something else. Leaving the house, you're about to head out. You don't know exactly how long you'll be gone. What do? Head out immediately. You'll deal with whatever happens when it happens. Pause briefly to make sure you have what you usually carry. Take a moment to think through where you're going and how you'll get back. Delay a bit and intentionally prepare for contingencies. Ooh. Well, personally, I would not delay a bit and intentionally prepare for contingencies, because, and I'm interested to see how it deals with this. I'm going to give the answer number 2, because this is absolutely how I leave the house every day. I take a moment and I say, spectacles, testicles, wallet, and watch. Right. So when I put my pants on, I've got my stuff laid out on the dresser. When I put my pants on, before I pull a shirt on, I stick the knife in this pocket, the car key goes in this pocket, cigarette lighter in this pocket, wallet, pistol somewhere, right? The other pocket knife in the right rear pocket, and my multi-tool on my left hip. And there's a pistol in there somewhere, right? And, so before I walk out the door, I do my good to go. Right. So I do not delay a bit and intentionally prepare for contingencies, because I have my setup. This is how I always leave the house. Well, not this. I'm usually in a Hawaiian shirt. And then I've got my truck. And my truck is outfitted and loaded for whatever I'm doing for the day. Now, usually that means that there's always a certain set of equipment in the back of the truck, which is 2 drones, 2 gimbals, 2 cameras, right? It's 2 of everything, at least 2 of everything. And when I say at least 2 of everything, there's 2 cameras and I've got my phone, right? There's 2 gimbals and I've got a gimbal for the phone, and I keep this little bad boy, which is another gimbal that doesn't require the phone or a cam. This is the gimbal and the camera all together. This will do the job in a pinch, right? Contingencies, because 2 is 1 and 1 is none, right? So I don't have to take a bit and intentionally prepare for contingencies. I did that once a long time ago. So one of the things that we're going to have to take a look at as we play this game is I'm going to have to look at things. You know what? We're going to try it right now. I'm going to go ahead and nope. I'm going to hold off on that. The next time I play this, I'm going to break it here. For now, we're going to see what happens when I hit enter. Next time, I'm going to say 2 because, and then give it a truncated version of the explanation that I just gave you guys. Let's see what happens. Not a checklist, not paranoia, just a quick habitual scan. Keys, phone, wallet. The kind of pause that doesn't feel like preparation so much as competence. You head out. What? Okay. So I'm probably going to have it remove this kind of stuff in future iterations. So there will be a gamification version. There'll be a full game version where you don't get any of this information, what this quietly revealed. That all stays in the background, right? But there's going to be the kind of quiz game version where okay. So in the quiz game version, it will also not reveal this at first. You'll go through the quiz game, and then at the end, it'll give you a printout where it'll, if for those who are interested in really going deep on the game, it'll give you a printout where it tells you when you made this choice, it changed your stats by this much, and it meant that in the future, you would not be offered choices like X, but you would be offered choices like Y, which would not previously have been available before you made this choice and changed your courage rating or your justice rating or your mercy rating by X, Y, and Z. And there's a long list of those sliders that go into this whole thing. So scene 2. On the street, it's mid-morning. You're walking past a small strip of shops when you notice raised voices ahead. A man is arguing with the cashier just inside a convenience store. The tone is sharp, but no one's touched anyone yet. A couple of bystanders has slowed down to watch. No alarms, no weapons visible, just tension. What do you do? Ooh. Let's slow down and observe from a distance. I want to know who's in the wrong here. Sergeant Major says, I have an infantry first aid kit hanging with my regular first aid kit so we can deal with life-threatening injuries. You know, old man, I'll tell you the truth. I have all the bits and bobs that would go into an advanced combat lifesaver kit, you know, like the heavy duty foam folding splint, the black tactical tourniquet. I've got all those bits and bobs laying around, but I haven't put them into a kit, and I should. I've even got a backpack that I bought for that reason. But what happened is I unpacked that backpack, put all the stuff in a box or a couple of boxes when we moved, and haven't repacked that kit. So maybe one of the things I should be thinking about in the not too distant is fixing that. So you don't insert yourself, not yet. You slow your pace, paying attention, tone, body language, who looks scared, who looks angry, who's bluffing. You notice the cashier keeps glancing toward the counter phone. The man's anger sounds performative, loud, but unfocused. The bystanders are waiting for something to happen. Nothing explodes, but you're no longer just passing through. You're aware. Quiet shifts. You're developing situational awareness. You're comfortable staying present without acting. Future options will tend to include assessment rather than forced action. Nice. Okay. Scene 3, escalation. The man suddenly slams his hand on the counter. Don't play games with me, he snaps. The cashier stiffens. One of the bystanders takes out a phone to record. This is still reversible, but it's closer to tipping. What do you do now? The man suddenly slams his hand on the counter. Don't play games with me. The cashier stiffens. Okay. You don't want to get caught up in something unpredictable. Stay where you are and keep watching closely. I'm going to address the man verbally. Nope. I'm going to stick my big ass in between them and say, whoa, what's up, son? You step in, not aggressively, but decisively. You place yourself between the man and the counter, close enough that he has to acknowledge you, far enough that you're not crowding him. Your presence changes the geometry of the room. The man's eyes snap to you. For a split second, he wasn't expecting resistance. Hey, you steady. It's not going where you think it is. Take a breath. The room gets quiet. The bystander filming hesitates. The cashier exhales just a little. What just happened? Still not labeled for you. You cross from observation to direct responsibility. Not bravado, controlled physical intervention. You've proven willing to absorb risk on behalf of someone else. Oh, nice. That's a more positive outcome than I expected from that insertion, actually. The situation slows but isn't over. The crowd reacts. 2 more people drift closer. You can feel the tension now, not just on the man, but on you. Someone mutters, he can't talk to her like that. Someone else says, this is how people get hurt. You're no longer invisible. The room is starting to take cues. What do you do next? Okay, hold up. Wait a minute. You see what just happened here? Walking past. You're walking past a small group of shops. You notice raised voice in hand. A man is arguing with a cashier just inside a convenience store. Who's bluffing? Cashier stiffens. The crowd reacts. Someone mutters, he can't talk to her like that. This is how people get hurt. No longer invisible. Okay. Clarification. Is the cashier in this case a woman? I ask because that factor may have altered my initial reaction. Now we're fine-tuning this game. It doesn't retroactively change what you chose, but it does explain why option 4 felt obvious instead of dramatic to you. Quietly noted by the engine, you're sensitive to power imbalance, protection of a more vulnerable third party altered your risk tolerance. That will shape how future intervention options appear. We're still in motion. No rewind unless you ask for one. Nope, no rewind. I think we're good. Scene 4, the crowd reacts. 2 more people drift closer, et cetera, et cetera. He can't talk to her like that. This is how people get hurt. You're between the man and the counter. The cashier is behind you. The crowd is watching for a lead. What do you do next? Keep your posture, but disengage verbally, letting staff take over. Maintain your position and calmly direct the man to leave. Raise your voice and assert authority to end this immediately. Let me do this. Give me a graphic visual in AR 16:9 with hyper-realistic comic book style influence that depicts the scene. Sergeant Major says, I would do something stupid. It's just who I am. Yeah. I can tell you guys that when the Sergeant Major says, I would do something stupid, what he means is something alarmingly unorthodox and effective. Like taking a battalion of senior non-commissioned officers and commissioned officers who have failed to arrive with their inspectable PII items for the PII inspection, giving them the command to right face and then the command to forward march directly at a brick wall and walk away from them to teach them that you don't show up unprepared. You're grown-ass men. You wear your fucking dog tags and get a haircut, soldier. I don't care if you're a colonel or a first sergeant or a master sergeant. You lead the example. You should have your ID card, your dog tags, and your fucking haircut. And your mustache should stop here, not here, bitch. True story. The old man was relentless on shitbags. It's one of my favorite facts about him. Okay, so I can already tell you that the image generation piece here is going to be something that's going to require a lot of work, a lot of tuning. And I'll probably just, because this is something that's going to have to go into the end product, the app/game, to make it really engage, to make it more engaging. So it was not. I could tell you if it was, I would likely have just walked away. Because part of the choice game is some people make bad choices. Oh, and see, she got some stuff wrong. This is clearly supposed to be me in the scene, and this is the angry guy, and this is the young woman. So the angry guy and I should be on the same side of the counter, and the young woman at the till. But that's okay. Let's go back and let's see. Maintain your position and calmly direct the man to leave. I'm going to go with number 2. I'll give him a chance. I'll give him one chance. Hold your ground, calm, steady, unmistakably present. You don't raise your voice. You don't touch him. You angle your body just enough to block forward movement and speak like someone who expects to be obeyed without theatrics. All right, you say, this ends here. Take it outside. There's a long, charged pause. The man looks past you at the small crowd forming behind him. A couple of people nod subtly, but it's there. The cashier stays quiet. Okay, so this is interesting that it's putting this in. There's a crowd gathering. One of the things that I wanted to be part of this program is that sometimes you come across a mob, an angry mob that's about to do some stupid shit, and you've got a mob stat that determines whether or not you're offered choices to join the mob or leave the mob. And if your mob stat isn't good enough, you may only be presented with the choice to start chanting or start throwing Molotov cocktails. The choice to walk away or call the police or even pull out your phone and start recording for TikTok may not be offered to you. But when we were designing that stat, we created a stat that we called almost agency. And agency, in your individual agency, is made up of two stats, which is individuation and something akin to character leverage. And now I can't remember what the other word I used there was, but you have individuation, and basically you have two separate stats, one being the likelihood that you are to have your normal will overridden by the will of a crowd, and the other one is the likelihood that you will overwhelm a crowd with your will, right? Whether or not you'll be swept up or remain an individual, and whether or not you have the authority, the presence, the charisma to cause a crowd to sweep up in what you're doing and saying. And clearly, the way that it's describing the crowd behind the bad guy, behind the aggressor, starting to nod and kind of move in on him and agree with me, it's describing a situation where I've essentially become a limited use purpose cult leader by taking right action at cusp. And now the crowd is putting pressure on the aggressor that's going to help me resolve the situation peacefully, unless the aggressor's slider bars are all way, way in the wrong direction. And to be clear, the sliders going left or right, for most of us, the left side sliders are going to be, we're going to think of them as things like cowardice, etc. And those map pretty closely to your politics along most of them. Kind of like the big five personality traits, which are not the same thing as this, but they're similar. Pit Daddy says, so I guess you're a winner if you don't say I should have walked by. Well, we'll see. Because you might have walked by this situation and found yourself in a worse one, Pit Danny. You might have walked by this, left that poor little girl to be harassed by the asshole, and gone around the corner to be mugged. Who knows? And that's so. I started to touch on it a little bit earlier when Aaron Olson asked the question about graphics. And then we'll get back to the game for a minute. I can give you guys about 10 or 15 more minutes before I got to get on the road. I got a gig in Augusta in a little bit. There was a game, Diablo, and we're on Diablo 4 now, and all of the Diablo games have been excellent. Frankly, I'd say Diablo 4 is the weakest. Diablo 3 is the best. But the original Diablo 1 introduced the idea of randomly generated dungeons. So it's a basic role-playing game. You've got your stats, strength, intelligence, dexterity, etc. Got your inventory with your weapons and everything. You fight monsters, you explore a dungeon. But the thing where Diablo 1 was incredibly innovative, was just brand new, is it was all generated as you played. Now, none of that generation was based on choices you made, right? But when you find the staircase to go down to the next level of the dungeon, until you click on the staircase to go down to the next level of the dungeon, the next level doesn't exist. right? So you can't go online and download a map of level 2 and kind of cheat by already having a map of the maze and being able to just go straight through it. No. Every time you walk onto level 2, and I do mean every time, if you save the game and leave and come back in, it's a different level 2. It's only the same level 2 that it is as long as you're on the level. You get a map as you explore, but you can't, the map is blurred out anywhere that you haven't been yet. And the same thing with all the loot drops and monsters. There are specifications. You'll find swords, you'll find clubs, etc. But if a sword drops when you kill a bad guy, right, then the sword will have a name, and it'll be 2 or 3 words long, and those will be randomly chosen to create so that there's almost every piece of equipment you find, unless it's a basic non-magic, low quality dagger, sword, club, etc., has a name that has that kind of epic, legendary feel. And the same thing with the monsters. You'll have goblins and imps and trolls and whatever, but then you'll encounter the boss monsters, and they'll have totally unique names that you've never seen before and may never see again because they're randomly generated, with the exception of a few key main bosses like the Butcher, Diablo himself, etc. And so that game kind of pioneered the generative thing. What I'm trying to do here is that to a whole new level. It might not even be the same. It basically, it won't even be the same game every time you play. You start off, the game is going to decide where it wants you to start, right? So you start off at home and walk out the door like we did in this one. And scene 1 might be you're meeting a friend at a coffee shop, or you get in the car to drive somewhere and run into a traffic jam, or you walk out the front door and your next door neighbor comes over screaming at you, accusing you of stealing the newspaper. And that's where the day starts. And depending on the choices you make, you might be Donald Trump at the end, or you might be Pol Pot. Or you might die in a gutter penniless and naked, right? Depending on the choices you make. Right? So I think this is going to be cool when it's done. There's still a lot of work to do here, but I'm having fun with it so far. So, choice registered. Choice 2. Hold your ground, calm, steady. You don't raise your voice, don't touch them. You angle your body just enough to block forward movement and speak like someone who expects to be obeyed without theatrics. All right. This ends here. We take it outside. There's a long charged pause. The man looks past you with a small crowd forming behind him. A couple of people nod subtly, but it's there. The cashier stays quiet, but you feel her weight shift as tension eases a notch. The man exhales through his nose, mutters something, and backs off a step. He turns and leaves. The crowd slowly disperses. Phones go down. The room exhales. You step aside. The clerk whispers a quick, "Thank you. You almost miss." What you just quietly locked in. You default to measured authority, not emotional dominance. You influenced a crowd without becoming its mouthpiece. You acted decisively without escalation. Sergeant Major says at this point Mario would be kinetic. So I've told this story before on air, and but I'm going to tell it again because it. Whew. And I'll have to tell it again when Mario's on air with me. So one night, no shit, there we was. It was me and Mario and 2 of our buddies, both Air Force guys, Dunks and Amarosa. And the 4 of us were at an IHOP in East Texas, back when you could still smoke in restaurants. Sitting in the farthest back corner at the largest table in the smoking section at like 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. We're playing Magic cards. It was a Saturday night, or I guess at this point, actually Sunday morning. And one of the waitresses came running at us from the front of the restaurant, screaming, boys, Kathy needs help. And the 4 of us, all 4 warfighters, right? Me and Mario Army, Dunks and Amoroso, both Air Force, right? So you're talking about 2 very different sets of training. But the 4 of us at this point in time have been hanging out. We've been good buddies, hanging out, playing magic cards, doing sister service joint training exercises and everything for almost 3 years at this point, right? 2.5, 3. We were at DLI together, and now we're in Texas together. So we're playing magic. The waitress comes screaming back, "Help, help, Kathy needs help." Kathy Kathy, if this ever comes across and you remember me and Mario helping you out here, don't take this the wrong way. But these factors are important. Kathy is a very sweet lady, but she's overweight, not especially physically fit, right? Probably in her mid to late 50s. And she's a police officer working in uniform as security for the IHOP to keep the bar crowds under control. And she's the only the only off-duty cop they've got there, right? So this is one of those situations where you got an off-duty cop in uniform being paid by the restaurant to pull security. And what had happened was there was a black guy, and the race really matters here. This really matters in this particular story. Because we were in East Texas in 2008. And this is one of those towns in East Texas where basically there are no black people. Like the community is entirely white, with the narrow exception of the black guys who are in the Army, Air Force, the Army or the Air Forces. We don't have Marines or Navy at this base at the time. They're either in the Army or the Air Force, and they're in certain high-scoring fields. They're in intelligence operations, right? Which is itself a primarily white job in the military. So this guy is a bit of an anomaly in the area, right? In fact, that particular Texas community, at the time, it also had a very low Hispanic population. This was a very, very white place. Kate says this is going to be good. I can tell. That's what I say when Chris won't get to the fucking point. Anyway, but that's why the race matters in this story. So, it's 2-3 o'clock in the morning. Kathy needs help. So the black guy was apparently inebriated. He was very drunk. He was harassing waitresses. And after he slapped some asses and grabbed some titties, Kathy, the a little over the hill, a little overweight, white, off-duty cop, went to intervene, and he started swinging at her. So when the waitress came and said, "Kathy needs help," I didn't know any of that until after the fact. I pop up, Mario pops up, right? Dunks and Amorosa pop up, and we move. So Dunks and Amorosa just pack up all our shit. They pack up the magic cards and laptops and the next thing I know, the next time I see the two of them, each of them has a book bag over each shoulder, because they both basically operate under the assumption, okay, we're all evacuating as soon as the situation is resolved. Whatever it is, Mario and Lowry are going to handle business, and at that time, it's going to mean that we have to leave. So they pack up the shit, and they've got the book bags, and they're ready to rock and roll. We get to the front, and I see that basically this black guy has the cop down on the ground and is she's on her back. He's on top of her. He's kind of wailing on her, and she's trying to get her taser off her belt. And so I run over and I wrap him up in a rear naked choke, get him up on his feet, and shove him up against the wall. And Mario jumps between the crowd and I and the dude and starts pulling crowd control. Nope, back up. And as soon as Mario gets like this, Dunks and Amorosa get up and they kind of build a perimeter to keep everybody back, as I've got this brother locked up in a rear naked choke. And I start whispering in his ear. I'm like, "Hey, brother, listen, you're making a mistake. And he starts screaming, you a N-word, you a this, let me go, F-1, right, screaming slurs and vulgarity. I can smell the Hennessy on his breath. I mean, he's hammered. He's screaming. And I said, and I tried to explain to him politely, listen, son, you're a black man in East Texas that's punching a white lady cop. This isn't going to work out for you. And he starts trying to throw some punches up over his shoulder, which he can't do. And so I just went ahead and rolled him down. If for those of you familiar with the techniques, right? I got the wrap, I pet the kitty, and then, locked in. As soon as I made the decision to go, just okay. Just that's it. That's all the motion right there. It's that little. Doesn't take much. And of course, he racked out like a sack of potatoes. We throw him in the back of the squad car, right? He's still unconscious. Get his wallet off him. Still unconscious. Close the door. Now he wakes up. He's in the back of the squad car. The lady cop has his wallet. This is not looking good for this guy. She opens up his wallet and she finds, oh no. Not his driver's license, which she also found. But no. His DOD CAT card. The man was a staff sergeant in the United States Air Force. Security forces. That means he was a military police officer for the Air Force. And he just found himself in the back of a cop car, thrown in there by an Army grunt who had to pull him off while he was shit-faced drunk in East Texas, being a black man, straddling and punching an old white lady cop. This was not a good day for this young airman, he was probably about the same age as me, but 2 ranks higher at the time. I was a specialist at the time, the staff sergeant. And there we are, like I said, 2-3 o'clock in the morning. And this was AIT, Advanced Individual Training. And we had orders back then, if we had any encounter with the police, we were to contact our first line supervising non-commissioned officer immediately. Pitt Denny asks, with many witnesses. There, probably 50 or 60 people. This was, at that time on a Saturday or a Sunday morning, Saturday night, you basically got the whole bar crowd. The place was packed, right? I was a little surprised. I was the first big scary white dude to pop up and do something about it in East Texas under those circumstances. But in fairness, we were probably the only 4 sober people there because we had been playing Magic all night, not drinking. Anyway. And so I had to call Drill Sergeant Parkamov at 3 o'clock in the morning because I had an encounter with the police. Drill Sergeant, I just had a police encounter. God damn it, Lowry. What happened? And I told him the story. He said, okay. And I told him, look, Drill Sergeant, I'll be honest. I almost didn't bother you with this because I know I'm not wrong. But it's kind of like the stud story where he knew he didn't have sex with the horse, but he was afraid that having worked professionally as a veterinarian assistant, whatever, and having to acquire the sample for stud purposes, that he would technically be lying and get busted by the polygraph. So listen, because this was at the same base. Parkamov knew the stud story. For those of you who remember it, I'm not going to repeat it now. I'll tell it again some other time, I'm sure. But it's kind of like that, Drill Sergeant. I think everything. I know everything's good. I'm not in trouble. But my name's on a police report. You're probably going to hear about it. You're probably going to hear about it. And, oh God, did we hear about it? Because Monday morning, PT formation, before we started stretching, the drill sergeant had the commander and the first sergeant come out, and they told the unit, all right, boys, here's what happened. They read the fucking police blotter. They read the police blotter to the company. Captain Willie B. Jumper, and I feel terrible. I don't remember that first sergeant's name, but anyway, Captain Jumper, Drill Sergeant Parkamov, and whoever the first sergeant was there, came out and read the police blotter. Let us tell you what Specialist Lowry got up to this weekend, which was fun. So that, but that, in that instance, I made choices. Mario made choices. Amorosa and Dunks made choices. And there was a crowd that was also making choices. Right? So this, the fact that my little experimental game here actually started talking about what's happening with the crowd and how that affected the outcome of the scenario, I think that's pretty interesting. Let's pop back over to it real quick. I'm going to read this and wrap up here. Scene 5, aftermath. Excuse me. Outside the store, a man who had been watching approaches you. Middle-aged, neutral tone. Excuse me. Handled that well, he says. A lot of people just freeze or overdo it. He gestures vaguely down the street. Cops are late these days. Makes a difference when someone's willing to step in. He pauses. Not hostile, not differential either. What do you do? All right, guys. I think that's pretty good. We end on the aftermath because if I answer that question, it's going to take us into another scenario, and it's already almost 8:30. So let me know what you think. In the live chat is great, but leave a comment, especially if you're on YouTube. Rumble too, absolutely. But especially on YouTube, let me know what you think of this kind of content. And we'll see what happens in the future. Maybe I can figure out a way to create like a web app that's connected to the Brushfire Mind website where y'all can go and play the game or do the character sheet, et cetera, et cetera. I think this is a fun idea, and I want to pursue it and play with it quite a bit, which will probably be what I do with the rest of my day after I get back from running this next survey. So you guys be safe out there. Thanks for watching this morning. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.